think, yes, there's certainly a legal basis for it. The question just needs to be asked, how does it fit into the bigger structure of government? The Disaster Management Act does not specifically make provision for this structure to be activated in the case of a national state of disaster. However, that has been done. But I think where the sticky points now come in is how accountable is this within the bigger structure. We might need to refer to the National Disaster Management Framework, which is a policy framework which many people forget about in these times. And the legislation makes provision for the Interministerial Committee on Disaster Management. The Command Council is not that. And the framework is very specific in allocating accountability measures to the Intergovernmental Committee. In this case, we don't see this happening very clearly.
So do you think that there are places where government has perhaps blurred the lines here?
I think definitely so. And I think one of the biggest problems is there's no open communication and transparency. And therefore, a lot of questions can be asked. I think all the measures that has been put in place has been done according to risk reduction measures. And I think the government has done that to fight the coronavirus. Yet we now move into a period where some of these things are being questioned. And I think the government's not always as transparent as we would like them to be.
I want you to give me an idea of how different the setup would be if there was full compliance with this piece of legislation and the framework that you're referencing for us tonight.
Well, the framework makes provision for, I think, if I remember correctly, 13 different ministers. Okay, that was written in 2005, so a lot of the ministries have changed. But be that as it may, it says explicitly that that particular body is chaired by the Minister of Cooperative Governance in this case. They need to meet at least 4 times per year, which they are not doing, or they haven't done. I don't think that structure has functioned at all in the past. And they are directly accountable to Cabinet. And it's very clear in the framework that it says that. And in the Disaster Management Act, similarly, it's quite clear. But the Command Council is something else. Now, nothing prohibits government and the President within a national state of disaster to implement any measure that he deems fit in order to mitigate the risk. I must be clear that. But in doing so, it must be within constitutional lines and within lines of accountability. And that component of it, I think, is not very clear to the general public.
So do you think that the inability then of the structure you're speaking about, the inability to, we don't know whether we actually have it, we don't know whether it's been meeting, has that made us worse prepared for a disaster like COVID-19?
Remember, when we wrote that portion in the framework, the idea was for that structure to be the political forum that runs through all spheres of government. In other words, it's supposed to bring together your provinces and your local government and the different structures within the constitution as well to coordinate and look at disaster risk issues. And the fact that it wasn't functioning obviously means there's been a political void. But from what I've seen and how our government has so far and the ministers have so far handled the situation, I think they've been on a steep learning curve. What does disaster risk mean? And I surely hope that this has now woken up these government structures so that they do implement it now and that they do in the future ensure that structure is functioning. Because there must be political oversight at the end of the day. And I think we see it filtering down, and I've seen it filtering down, especially with my research on local government level, that major high-level portion of lack of political accountability inhibits the proper application of the Disaster Risk or the Disaster Management Act at local government level. So it is certainly something that is very useful and should be there, but it should be functioning on a continuous basis, not only when we see a crisis.
Of course, one of the big questions that arises is the extent to which all of this affects government's decision-making, and if in fact government has been far-reaching in its decision-making and they've gone beyond what they need to?
It is a difficult question. I think the easy answer is if we can justify the decisions and the directives and the regulations through scientific evidence, then I think the majority of the population would accept it. When it comes to reaching far beyond your powers for some political gain and scoring some political points, then it becomes unconstitutional to start off with. And then we can ask questions about the legality of the decisions being made.
All right, let's leave it there for tonight. Thank you so much for your insight on this particular issue, Professor Dewald van Niekerk.